Okay,
Yeah.
welcome everybody. You are tuned to the third episode to Agile Toolkit tutorial. Your hosts are, as always, Romans and myself, Armin. If you enjoy this tutorial, you will find all the series on our website, agiletoolkit.org/tutorial. Today, we want to talk about how Agile Toolkit views operates with a physical data storage. Romans, bring it on.
Hello everybody and welcome to this episode. Views do not operate with database directly. Instead, the request is processed through a few objects as I illustrated on this diagram. As you can see, Form does not know how to operate with model directly, and it is a job of a controller to establish this interaction. There are two main classes for models, SQL models and NoSQL models. While SQL models support all sorts of features like relation traversal, joins, conditions, expressions, NoSQL models are designed to be lightweight, fully compatible with views and controllers, yet customizable for every possible implementation of your database.
Can you explain what you mean by NoSQL?
Certainly. There are a variety of databases which conform to the standard of ANSI SQL, and this is basically when you can query the database and it will bring you results in the format of the table. And especially recently, many new databases such as MongoDB, Memcache, Redis, and many more appeared, and they bring in a new interface of communication, usually based on objects and sometimes even JavaScript. Each database has very unique features. It's suitable for some particular thing, but the interface is not common. There's no standard in there. Therefore, if we're building anything for NoSQL, we can't rely on features such as traversal because it is implemented very differently in each database.
Okay.
So what we do in Agile Toolkit is we focus on the SQL first and implement all the features according to the standard, and then we provide a compatible class which you can modify specifically for your database type. For this tutorial, I'd like to focus on SQL databases only. To fully understand how data management works, I suggest that we start from the bottom up and look at the SQL class first. I have prepared a couple of examples which are in our Lost and Found project, which database we also is going to use for this tutorial. And I will show you how we can get this project from GitHub and install on a new computer.
First, we're going to the repository of Lost and Found that is on GitHub. And if you haven't downloaded your GitHub client already, it will show you to do so when you click Clone on Mac. If you already have installed it, automatically your GitHub client will show up and ask you where to put the repository to. Again, if you don't have the GitHub client already, by clicking the clone button, it will direct you to the page where you can download it, and it's completely for free. Now, we already have a GitHub client there in place, and we just said which folder we want to have for the Lost and Found project.
Now I have it on my local computer in here. Lost and Found project already includes Agile Toolkit, so you don't need to worry about downloading anything else. And I also wanted to show you just a little bit to help you on the way how to work with GitHub. And because we're doing multiple tutorials, we wanted for you a way how you can switch between different I suppose days. And if you go in branches, you will see there is an entry here for tutorial 2. There's going to be more entries as we go forward, tutorial 3, 4, and so on. And if you want to switch to that particular tutorial, let me show how it's done. So in pages, these are the files I have at the moment. As I'm switching to this tutorial by double clicking on it, it see that, as you can see, a couple of files disappear. So it will automatically change your local files to match that particular day. Right. The other thing I wanted to show is what happens if you change any files, such as, maybe you wanted to just change.
Hang on. What we could do is change your because that's what the people have to do anyway. Make an example of that, what you're just about to explain, with config default, because they have to set the database. They have to set their database, and then they will see what happens when they change.
Okay. First of all, once you install your lost and found project, you will be able to find it, to simply open it, and it might show you the page like this. But there are a couple of things you might need to do to be able to get it fully working. The first thing is this file with config defaults. If I open this file, you see it uses username root and the password root with the database lost and found, which is the default for this. If that's not what you're using, if your database is named differently, or you have a more complex root password on a local computer, what you need to do is you need to duplicate this file and save it as config PHP. Now inside that config PHP, you can change anything you want, and it will be used instead of the config default.
And the important thing to note now that you changed your config file, you might be worried. Oh, but what if I upload that to the branch? Well, the config PHP file is ignored by Git, so you will not change your password or make your password public accidentally, because the config PHP file will never be shared with anybody when you're using Git.
Okay, one other thing is I'm just going to add an example comment here. And as you change the files, and if you go back to your GitHub client, you will see that it automatically tracks your changes and shows you what have been done. And possibly after you do the change and you would like to switch to a new branch, it might complain that it doesn't know what to do with your changes. If you want to keep your changes, you can simply click commit here. I'll put some message in commit. It's not sending you messages anywhere yet. And even though if you do click sync in here, it wouldn't accidentally overwrite anything online, because you simply wouldn't have permissions to do so. However, there is one other way. And if you right click on this file here, you can discard changes, which means they will be reversed in your file in here. Now they're back. And finally, if you click on the history, you can see everything what was done before, and if you committed something by accident, such as this one, you can revert this commit as well. So I'm reverting this, and I have no comment anymore again.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Now, after we got the basic overview of how to use GitHub, we can jump into our feature for today, which is the SQL.
Right. If you want to follow us on your own GitHub, you will need to go into branches, and we will prepare a tutorial 3 branch for you in here once we finish with this podcast. So you will be able to click on that and get all the same files we're editing in here. Okay, so now back to the databases, and we were talking about DSQL. So Armin will give you a short introduction about what DSQL stands for.
So if you don't know already, DSQL stands for Dynamic SQL. It's an object-oriented interface, a query builder for any data exchange with the database. While DSQL is capable of producing any imaginable query, it has no information at all about your database structure. We have prepared a couple of examples to help you understand the principles behind DSQL and when this class should be used.
So I'm showing here my first example. Let me actually enable the debug mode in here so that you can see which query was executed and results on the same page. First of all, the variable Q is going to hold our dynamic query object, which is produced when I call the structure in here. I can have multiple queries at the same time, and I can reference them by the different variables. And then as I call methods like debug, table, or field, it is modifying the query, and it stores all those modifications inside this object. And finally, when I call a method like get1, it will return the actual value to me. I also must know that calling a method like this returns the same variable for the object, which means I can use that as the starting point for the next call. And this is called chaining.
To demonstrate how DSQL works, we are using the tables from our Lost and Found project. Romans, could you show us the schema?
Certainly.
Yeah. So the user table holds the personal data of the users. The item table has all the items that got lost or found, while the item type table specifies what kind of item was lost or found: keys, umbrellas, girlfriends, and so on.
Let me also show you the database inside a tool which you might recognize, and it is called PHP My Admin. So there are 4 tables like Armin just explained, and I can actually browse them. So we have pre-populated the countries in preparation for this tutorial. We also have a couple of users in here. So there's Armin as admin with the password admin, and then there's a demo user. We also have a flag for isAdmin, which is a standard MySQL Boolean variable, either 1 or 0. And we also have a couple of items in here. So you can browse that. Also, if you remember, in our second tutorial, we have built a really primitive administration interface for our databases. So we enhanced that a little bit just to cover all the tables in here. But first you will need to log in with admin, and then you will have a new tab in here, it says admin, and there are a couple of tables. If you want to know how to create this admin quickly, you need to go to the second episode of this tutorial and watch that again. So as you can see, we have 3 items and 4 users, and 2 of those items were actually lost by Joe. I have a simple query here which I'm going to execute just to show you how it's done in a conventional way, and this is actually containing the join in here. So I'm looking to get the title of the lost item and the first name of the person who lost it, by selecting from the item table and joining that with the user table. And I have the result: Blue Umbrella by Joe, car keys by Armin, and wallet by Joe.
Great. We see now how you could execute a simple query, but how you can use that more complex query with joins inside the SQL.
And let me go to the second example and show you how you can join tables. So the trick to build any query is to call proper methods as many times as necessary. In this next example, I have, again, I'm setting a table, this time item, a different field, and I'm also producing a join with a user table. Instead of, I'm sorry, this shouldn't be here. Instead of just getting one value, I have built a simple iteration here, which pulls the data from the query inside the array called row and displays it on the page. So I have exactly the same information, and as you can see, this is a very similar query to what I had in PHP-MyAdmin.
Can you tell us exactly what is happening when you call these methods? Does it store chunks of a query?
The arguments I pass to the methods are stored in a property until the results are required, such as at this point. You don't even need to explicitly execute the query. When the object is used in for each loop, it will execute the query once and then continue fetching results. When it's the time to execute the query, all the previously specified arguments are collected together and placed into internal query template, which might differ for different SQL server vendors, but that is something as a user you shouldn't worry about too much. It's done automatically. This process is called rendering.
So unless you plan to introduce new type of queries or add support for new SQL database, you don't even need to know how that stuff works, right? However, understanding which methods can be called and what are the possible arguments are essential, of course. Agile Toolkit has a documentation page for DSQL, and you can find all the different ways to produce queries there. Roman's DSQL claims to be immune to SQL injections. Could you explain how that is implemented?
Sure. As I mentioned already, all the data to DSQL is stored and then placed into the template. There are, however, 4 different types of those arguments, and the way how they insert them into the template depends on the type. The first argument of where method or field are considered to be a field name by default. Field name will receive ticks around it. This is a standard SQL syntax to avoid any problems where field could be the same as a reserved word. You could have a field called select, for example, in a database, and it will not become confused with the select you use for the statement. The second argument is parameter. It is being passed through the method called escape. Because we're using PDO, this will also produce a parametric variable, and the actual value will be specified as parameter alongside of the query. Let me give you the quick example of that now by specifying the email. Sure. Right, so we have only 2 items now, and as you can see, this parameter is highlighted in green, and it also displays an actual parameter as it was used when passed to DSQL. The third type of argument is expression. In other words, it's a different DSQL object. You can recursively inject DSQL objects inside other DSQL objects. And finally, the fourth object is a field. object, which I'm going to show you later.
I have two questions. Firstly, I understand when field names should be used and when parameters are used, but explain when expressions are useful.
Oh, it is used in very many different situations. That helps produce subqueries. That also helps us to use custom expressions such as formulas. The next example I'm going to be demonstrating how to perform a query with a formula. I use this expression called length title inside the field, and because this is a custom syntax and the SQL might not support that and it might want to escape it, this construction of expression like this allows me to input any line inside a SQL. And as you can see, the second parameter here is alias. So this being inserted properly alias it as len, and then finally I was able to use that with the results.
Thanks. My other question, you said that a method such as where assumes first argument to be a field and second argument to be a parameter. What if I want to compare two fields?
You can do that by passing through argument, by passing argument through a method. If you use getField name, then it will ensure that it's used that it's recognized as a field parameter. Let me show you how. Okay, so just to override just to override the default for the second argument, I'm using a getField modifier here, and as you can see in the query, it's now putting that in backticks.
Well, I think that's as deep as we want to go in the tutorial. There are more interesting features inside, and you can find about them in the documentation. All of the examples demonstrated here can be found in our Lost and Found application on page called page/dsql.php. And we already shown you how you can get the source code from GitHub. Next, let's talk about models in Agile Toolkit. A model class is the object for interacting with database using the active record pattern. Models are aware of tables, and they allow the developer to load one record at a time into memory, perform changes, and then save data back into the database. And there are two base classes for models. If you choose to use model table, you get a model which can take advantage of SQL relational database features such as subqueries, selects, conditions, transactions, and much more.
In the previous tutorial, we have already defined user and item models. I have made some small enhancements and modifications, and now we actually have 4 fully functional single table models. Models can be used for either accessing the data directly, or when model is passed to a view, then view is able to access the same data. For example, we have a page admin, which you managed to see before, and it adds CRUD views, associating them with appropriate user in here. But now let me show you how you can use the model directly, and this is our first example in our model tutorial.
We can here see now that you used M is like this, add model user. What's the difference between add model user and set model user? Wouldn't we like do set model?
So the add is a primitive function. It's a really basic function of Agile Toolkit, and it creates a new instance of this class, and it assigns it to the m variable.
Yes.
The views, though, support a new method which is called setModel, and can be used like this one. It is really similar, maybe confusing, but what it does in addition, it's not only creates a new model, but it also associates that with a CRUD, which includes the creation of a controller, and the job of the controller is to populate the fields of the user inside the form or the grid. So there's much more actions involved and then simply calling add.
Okay. So previously we looked at example where DSQL was loading a single email from the user table. The same thing can be done with a model too.
The model object can have a single record loaded into the model object. Using get and set methods, we can either read or write the fields, and after we perform some of the changes, we can use save method to store results back into the database. There are two other significant features of model implementation that are in Agile Toolkit. Firstly, the range of records which is possible to load can be restricted by a condition. I can apply a new condition to existing model. Now, because admin's user is an admin, he can no longer be loaded into this model, and that's why the second next record is being loaded for Romans.
Okay.
The other significant feature of model is that model stores meta information about its fields. It's not limited only to field name and types, but also caption, default value, hint, as well as some user-defined properties can be stored. This information is picked up by views, and it allows them to properly reconstruct the fields of either a form or columns of grid. And then as more complex views introduced in the future, they will also be accessing the model properties.
I have a question, Romans. The object relational managers, such as this one, have been around and can be found in other frameworks. While simplifying life of a developer, they often introduce performance issues. What about that with Agile Toolkit?
Well, models in Agile Toolkit are truly the state of the art. All the model advanced features never affect the complexity of your page. The model will never execute more than a single query. Models rely on the power of SQL engine, and they build using joins, expressions, and conditions through the DSQL object. Let me show the next example. Here I'm trying to achieve the same functionality as before with DSQL. As you can see, the output is identical. However, there is one difference. Before, it required us to perform a single query to get all the data. This time I'm traversing between related models, and as a result it loads many more records. I will add a simple counter hook into the database class to count how many queries have actually been executed. 7 queries, and that is general approach of object-relational mappers today. Agile Toolkit, however, has a better way. For starters, when relations were introduced, they automatically added a few expressions into our query for fetching more information from related tables.
Wouldn't complex queries be slower to execute?
Very slightly. SQL engines have spent years to optimize the performance of the query parsing. Competing ORMs might rely on multiple simple queries and caching. Agile Toolkit ORM fetches all the information in one go, and it happens much faster.
I can't help but notice, in our example with DSQL, we relied on join between item and user table. Here, subselect is used to select a single field. What if I want to query multiple different fields?
Our next example is doing the same thing with joins and making the query even more efficient. by joining. The join method returns the new object, which can then be used to import additional fields from that join. So M user in here is the join object, this is how we call it. And by calling add field from that join object is importing the field from a foreign table, such as user in this case. And there's the relation here, and then join for the country. And as you can see, it properly does all the aliasing of those tables. And when the fields are specified, such as user's first name, it uses the prefixes properly. So there's no conflicts, even if you join the same table several times.
Yeah. What you did here with the models and echo, can this also be used with views?
Any model is compatible with any view. Let me feed exactly the same query inside a grid.
And of course it shows us much more fields because we didn't define in set model which fields we want to look at.
Yes, by default it shows us all the field.
So we have an absolute separation of the database related logic and the user interfaces.
Yes, as I have already mentioned, entire user case can be designed in the models. Imagine two developers working on your software side by side, where one guy is a database model guy and the other is responsible for the user interface. Model is the exact language they talk to each other. And because models can be used without the UI, a series of unit tests can be built around them.
Thanks, Romans. Now, surely the ORM and Agile Toolkit can produce absolutely any query. What if I want to use a custom function or something?
Where models can have any interface, it graciously steps away and reveals the DSQL which is hidden underneath the models. It even allows developer to use segments of custom written SQL code without breaking anything around it. In my next example, I have a series of enhancements to default model functionality. So I will start with something really simple, just the model for the user and a CRUD. I will start by adding expression for the full name. So we have first name and last name, but we don't have a field for a full name. I can add it as expression, and expression will execute concatenation of both fields. Next, I will add an expression for a subselect. This subselect will produce a query for amount of lost items for that particular user. So when I define expression, I can either specify the text right away, or I can define a method which will return the actual text to be used every time the query is generated. So now I have a field called items lost, and it shows me the number of lost items by using this query. Let me also turn on the debug on this model here, so you can see the full query for the user. So you see it's pretty simple. We select first name, last name, password, and also there is this our first expression for concatenation, and the second expression for the number of lost items. I'm not limited only to the queries like that. In fact, it's considered a bad practice in Agile Toolkit to simply write your queries like this. So let me re-implement that with a DSQL instead. Okay, and obviously I'm returning object this time, but the Agile Toolkit is smart enough to recognize that. Now I have this subquery which selects all the count from the item, but it's not linked with a particular row yet. It displays 3 items for every record So we need to add a condition. And this is where I'm using the fourth type of parameter, and it's a field parameter. I'm getting this field from the model ID, and it's being inserted as an argument inside the where clause. You see it appearing here, and the SQL will automatically look at the table, and or it might be a joint field. It will automatically recognize that, and it will insert into my query properly. So now I have items again properly associated. Finally, there is a shortcut for all of this code which can be used in Agile Toolkit, and I'm going to demonstrate how to use that. Again, it will produce exactly the same query, but this time the syntax of writing it is much simpler because we're not even going into the SQL. So just in a few words I will explain what happens here. This is our model for the user. As you remember, we have a relationship defined here, that one user has many items, and then Ref SQL prepares a new model for item. So it's been loaded from this class as a base, but also it creates the dependency between the item and the user. The SQL postfix should only be used when this model is placed inside a subquery. It wouldn't work on its own. And finally, when I call a count method of any model, it will produce the DSQL code which is counting the numbers of entries of that particular model.
So I have two questions for that. The ref SQL then depends on that my model is set up with has many options. Otherwise it would not work, would it?
Yes, it only works with has many.
Okay. And you said before that ref SQL can only be used on subqueries, or did you say it can be used in any query?
Because of what it's inserting in here, it relies on a field property. So it takes the field of a user and adds it as a condition inside the model of an item. So there is a link between two models, and if you take this model on its own and try to load any data in there, you would have an error. If you want to use a normal traversal, I have actually skipped over one example in here. Let me go back to that and show you how traversal can be done in a very basic form in Agile Toolkit. So in this case, we're loading the item first. We're loading the first possible item, and then we're showing the title, and to get a name, we are traversing using the ref method into the user ID to get the first name of the user.
Again, this ref method, does that depend on has many?
Yes, so it works because inside the item we declared that it has one user. And by the way, this is this field which was used as a title to display previously. We also saw that.
What does this parameter do? What does this parameter do? This email parameter, or the third parameter of has1?
Okay, so has1 takes 3 parameters at the most. The first is the class or the suffix of the class. So the model user is being referenced here. You can't use object, it needs to be the name. The next is the field, which is used for joining the two of them. So for example, by default, it will look into item.user_ID. But if it's a different field, then you can specify it here. The third argument is defining what is a title.
What do you mean by title?
That means if we use that in a grid,
Yeah.
Instead of showing the first or last name of the user, it will display an email. When
Oh,
we'll,
the default value would be name or what?
the default
Or,
is name, yeah. If nothing is defined, then the name is used. If the user doesn't have name, it will, I think, fall back to ID. Let me show it to you.
yes.
So I'm going to hide example number 2 and go to simply listing the items. This example here. Okay, so you can see that blue umbrella by record 4. Because there are no name for the user, there is first name and last name, that's why it shows like record 4.
Okay, so it wouldn't give us like back just the ID itself, but it says record number sign 4, number sign and then the ID.
Yeah, and if I use a first name here, then the output will change here, and you can see that
What would happen if you put in instead of first name there, if you would say user ID?
ID, yeah.
Okay, so we don't get the before when it fell back to the ID and it said what did it say, record number sign ID.
Yes.
It will, because this can, yeah, maybe I don't want record sign record number sign and then the ID. I just want the ID back. Then I have to specify the ID field there.
That's right. And what is actually quite exciting, we can create a dynamic, expression in here. Let me go back to this example we had for concatenating first and last field, and I'm going to put that inside the user model like this, and I'm going to use full name here. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, it will, exactly.
It says job logs, and if you look at the query, it automatically figures out what to select in here. So it selects the concatenation of both names from the user. All this is done absolutely safe all this is done very consistently, no duplication of fields, and very, very smoothly. Without.
Well, terrific. So Agile Toolkit uses layers of functionality like that to hide the complexity.
Yeah, and just before we move on, let me show one last example. I want to enhance my UI CRUD to allow editing items within the scope of a user. To do that, I will need to add a new button and the new page, which will open by clicking on this button. In this new page, I simply add a condition which will affect the scope of the model used inside the CRUD. The sticky get argument will make sure that links generated in CRUD do not lose the ID we have passed into this page. So you can see there is ORM in here with one lost item. If I click on details, it shows me that one item. And Romans and Joe in here as well. If I click on Romans, has no items. Let me actually add an item for the Roman, and title would be girlfriend. Oh, we don't have the tag for person. Yeah. And lost in Afghanistan. So if you can see now the calculation is also being shown here, and it all works really well. The UI is very consistent and it links the records. So let me get back to the code and just explain how I was able to achieve by this line here plus those 3 lines in a separate page. So first of all, when I call grid add column as expander. Expander is a built-in column for the grid, which allows me to link the button with this area underneath it. And by default, when I click on the button, it will load the subpage, which is consistent with the name of the field. So it will look for page model/details. One other thing it will do is it will pass the ID into this page. So on this page, I know which record user clicked on. Okay, now if I click details, the data is being loaded through Ajax, and you see the ID is 2. Okay, so first, and a really important thing, many new users forget about this, but we need to make this ID sticky. So as we interact with that new page now, we don't want to lose this ID. So we set it as a sticky get, and any code after this line is going to use this ID in all the links it is generating. The other thing is I need to load the user model, and this is what I'm doing. Just like before, I'm adding the user model and I'm loading the specified ID. This line again is important so that we make sure there's actually a user like that, and it can be loaded. So if if there is a condition, we don't want user to be able to specify any ID. It need to be loadable through this model. And after that, we're using reference here. This time we're traversing in a reverse direction. So model user have a relation which says has many item, and this is what we're traversing this time. It returns a new model to us which we can use as a source for the CRUD. And this model automatically have a condition set to only show the items related to the user we loaded before. And that's pretty much it.
Can you just one little bit of more explanation? Can you go back to the examples? And what does if CRUD grid, what does that expression mean?
Okay, the way how CRUD is implemented is it needs to draw this table first. But if I click on add, it opens up exactly the same page. So again, all of this will be executed until this line. And this line will detect if we're in a browsing mode or in the editing mode, and will adequately initialize the object. So it will either initialize a grid when we are browsing, but when we're adding, it will initialize a form, so the grid wouldn't be there. And this construction is a simple way to confirm that we're actually in a browsing mode. So we only want to add column into grid when we're browsing. That means when I click on this, it will have no effect because there are no grid. It will
I understand.
show the error otherwise.
Yeah.
So just to make sure, the Agile Toolkit still relies on the rules of PHP. For example, when you have a form and you hit a submit and it executes a bit of PHP, that means the execution still needs to go through all the file. It can't just extract a bit of PHP code and execute that somehow magically. And you need to keep that in mind as you use that. That is why we need to rely on all sorts of workarounds like sticky get to pass IDs and this one. This is just a limitation of server and client interface with HTML5.
Well, if I am about to put together a team and work on a really big project, would Agile Toolkit be up to a task like that?
Yes, absolutely. As previously demonstrated, apart from seamless performance and security, functionality can be organically built in layers. New features can be easily added, and the interface can remain consistent. And this is ideal for web development with Agile methodology. And this is where the Agile Toolkit takes its name.
My final question is how to implement actions. For example, we have lost items. Now, how to add a button mark as found?
Well, that's a good question. And let me go through all the steps of, I suppose, general iteration of Agile approach. And I will start by changing this in the database, modifying the model, and then the user interface. This will take me maybe 10 minutes or 5 minutes to do the whole thing. So first I'm going back to the item, and unfortunately we don't have a field which will tell if the item is being recovered yet or not. And we'll need to add this field now. Okay, so the field is added. The next thing I need to do is, I don't have the menu on the screencast, but I'm clicking on the database and synchronize model feature of MySQL Workbench. What it's going to do now, it will compare my database of lost and found with the schema, and it will say your item model has been changed and we need to perform this query here to synchronize it. For now I'm just going to go ahead and execute that. If you want, I can look into PHP-MyAdmin just to confirm the field is in there.
Of course, people that don't have this piece of software simply could add the same field in their PHP-MyAdmin web application, and they could do it manually themselves.
That's right.
Or they wait until they get an update on our GitHub repository.
Yeah. Okay, and if you downloading that from GitHub, you have actually, I have forgot to mention that, but if you look into the doc, you will find there is already a dump in here, so you just need to import that, and it will include this new field as well.
The only thing that you have to do is you only have to create the database itself yourself in PHP-MyAdmin. So you first create a database, name it lost and found, and then you will import this SQL into the database, and you have all the tables created for you.
Yeah, that's right. So that's how you do it. You just go into doc, take the SQL, and you need to import into a new database. Make sure the database is the same as in your configuration file. So I'm using lost and found. Okay, so that's done. Next, we need to go into the model and update the item. Because Agile Toolkit models are much more dynamic than any other framework, is found?
Is found, yes.
Okay, and the type was Boolean. Okay, next, to check this, I'm going to the admin here, and under item admin, I see there's a new column in here. Let's say the girlfriend lost by Roman was found. So I can already edit it. I just needed to add a field. Okay, but then again, using this interface, I can uncheck, which is a bad business case. The user should only be able to say this is found, and there should not be a way back. So I'm now going back to my previous page for the model, and I'll want to add a button here which says item is found. So when I go into details, I want to have a button in here saying this girlfriend of Roman is found. Okay, so first I need to have a variable pointing in grid. In this example, I create a grid and then I set model right away. I'm losing the reference to the grid, to the CRUD, I'm sorry. So I need to do this. Then, as you saw before, if CRUD grid, then I'm building this new button. The type of the column I'm going to be using is called button, and the name is found. Third argument can be a caption, mark as found. Okay, now if I go into detail, I have this button, mark as found, but as I click, nothing happens. I get the error. So when the button is clicked, the web page is going to create an AJAX request asking what should I do now. And to catch this request, I need to write condition to see if the found argument has been specified. Inside
it's found. Yeah, it's found.
Yeah. Inside here, I would like to use the model action to actually perform the change. So first of all, I need to load that model item, and I'm using CRUD model load get found. So in here, the ID is being passed, and I'm just loading there. And for now, let me simply create an alert, such as showing a name maybe of title of that item as a placeholder for now, just to see that this piece of code is actually working. So I need to do doesn't matter, CRUD GS alert, yeah, CRUD title execute. So let's see if that works now, and it says girlfriend. Should I explain anything in here? Because this JavaScript interaction, we hope to cover that in a later episode of this tutorial.
Yes.
But for now, what I want to mention is that this line is sending back the JavaScript to my browser, instructing me to show alert with the title of the loaded model. But that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is call this object method. Let's call it set as found, or mark as found. Mark as found. And here I will say success. Now we need to implement that method inside our item model. So inside here. Okay, and it is really simple. This is found equals true, and we need to save ourselves, and that's all. Final thing, probably, what we will want to do is reload this grid as I click on the button. Again, about reloads, we'll get to that later. I'm just write this for now. Okay, so it's time for the test. I'm reloading everything just to be sure. Going into Roman details here, clicking on the button, it says success, and you see that tick box appears here. and there is no way I can get it unticked. So everything according to our plan. So we have implemented the action in the model true to the ideas of separation of business logic and UI. And we have built a UI which shows the new column and executes the action here. It's not done automatically by CRUD, but maybe in some future versions there will be more advanced CRUD which will allow you to interact with it with some of the methods. And the final step would be to see all the changes I did and store them inside GitHub. Okay, I'm just making sure I'm on the right branch in the master here. Should I comment the examples, or we could do it after the...
Well, the people can comment them themselves. Well,
okay.
Just like it. Will we now make a new branch like tutorial 3, or?
Yeah, let's commit first and then make a new branch. So changes for tutorial. I'm going to commit that. Then I go into the branches. And is there something else? Okay. Okay, and tutorial 3 is a new branch. Synchronizing, and voila. So you should be able to now get all this and have the separate branch for tutorial 3. It will be where we left off. So if you want to play with examples, you need to comment, uncomment, and so on.
Wonderful. Well, you can see Agile Toolkit database relational implementation is certainly years ahead of the competition in terms of simplicity, performance, and flexible designs. What I find amazing is that Agile Toolkit implementation is several times shorter than some other active record or ORM implementation, yet it can do so much. But models is just one of 3 innovative directions of Agile Toolkit. In the next tutorials, we will focus on the views, templates, HTML, CSS, and changing look and feel of our Agile Toolkit application. Let me remind you that today with you were Armin and Romans, and you can find list of all our tutorial episodes at agiletoolkit.org/tutorials. So it's a goodbye from me at that point, and see you next time.
See you in the next tutorial.